You can't be present, all the way present, if you're not present with all the parts of yourself. I mean, it's that simple. Are you willing to know everything about yourself? The light and the dark, the good and the bad.
I had to visit the darkest place of myself. I had to integrate with that part of me. I call it befriend your beast.
If you want to be a healer, if you want to, really help people, if you want to be a shaman, therapist, whatever it is, you have to know your capacity for darkness and you have to see it in the world. You have to look it square in the eye.
A lot of women don't know this. I learned what feminism, the movement, was propagated by the government so that they could tax 100% of the population.
Right.
So I've actually been advocating more for men my whole life. Part of my mission is really to help men understand they can attract more of a solid feminine energy.
Relationships that don't work out. Why are you attracted to certain kind of people? Why do you keep getting into these relationships that don't work out? What is that about you? What is unresolved inside you? And if you can orient to that in all your relationships, in life in general, you're just you come more into reality.
So we're dealing with our past. We're also intending on our future, but yet all we have is now. How do we actually feel without getting lost in the feeling? OG Mastery, the original gangsta, God and Goddess, all coming into mastery. We're coming into you. This is where we talk business, sex, relationships, money, health, entrepreneurship, and self-awareness. Now your host, Robyn Linn. Mastering your emotions. How do we fulfill our dharmic paths that is not repeat old patterns or cycles that the mind gets us caught up into, but how do we actually navigate deep from a feeling state without letting our emotions take us over? How do we actually allow our emotions to guide us? And I am here with the emotion master coach himself, David Sutcliffe. David, welcome to OG Mastery.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So a lot of what inspired me to want to connect with you is a lot of what I personally work on. A lot of it comes with relational development. Preface this, I've studied yoga, I've studied from shamans and swamis and the masters, Thich Nhat Hanh. I had a main teacher, Ajahn Jeff, at the Metaforest Monastery. I studied with them for 7 years, living with the monks on and off. So Theravada Buddhism, learning how to use my energy to create alchemy. So then studying alchemy, and then recently Taoism and sexual alchemy to basically lead me to a lot of work with trauma. And one of the things that I've been working on with myself and my clients, and then all of my friends that are naturally coming to me, asking me, how do I do this? And one of the things that I feel is so important with the work that you do, how do we feel without getting caught up in the energy of the feeling, but actually really being present and allowing ourselves to be in business, to be in life, and to not get caught up in our own isolation or our own sense of self, because there tends to be almost where we can get pseudo-spiritual and we can get lost in the ideologies of the practice itself instead of actually just being present with what's going on. So we're dealing with our past. We're also intending on our future, but yet all we have is now. So how do we actually feel without getting lost in the feeling?
It's just practice. We just have to practice it, really. It's like everything else. I mean, that's the big thing that I preach in my work, to take out the mystery behind it, that everything is it's just practice, and people don't know how to practice, so they don't know how to feel. And really the work that I do is teaching them how to do that. We learn to suppress and repress our emotions, our feelings, and that causes us all kinds of suffering and distortions and acting out and procrastination, and all the problems from my point of view that we have in life are generally in some way related to our suppressed feelings. So we have to teach people how to feel. and that it's safe to feel, and give them an environment to be able to do that. And when they first start feeling, very often the feelings can overwhelm them. It's hard to stay present with our feelings when they've been suppressed for so long. They can overwhelm our nervous system. We can go into fight or flight. We can create distortions around what these feelings mean. So it takes time to build up our nervous system and to build a container for ourselves, to learn to hold ourselves in all those feelings. But once we learn to do that, then we learn to just stay present with ourselves. We become an observer of our feelings, and we can experience them. We can be with them without necessarily reacting to them. They can serve as it's really information. It's a data point. If I'm having a feeling, it's an indication of something. So can I observe that feeling, ask myself questions from a place of curiosity about what it might mean, and then that allows me a lot more discernment in decisions that I might make moving forward. So it's not easy. Most of us get trapped in our feelings unconsciously. We're driven by unconscious emotions. And so the first part of the work that I do is really just helping people understand that concept first and foremost, and helping them understand what is actually going on in the unconscious. What are these feelings inside them that have been suppressed for a long time, and how are they acting out in their life in reaction to those feelings, or to avoid feeling those feelings. And then we go from there.
Because a lot of it is re-establishing identity, right? Because once I can see as the witness what's presenting itself, and I'm choosing, well, wait, this isn't healthy for me or my experiences, I now am either going to commit to reestablishing who I am in that environment. And I think that's the piece that most of us are, in the Buddhist term, clinging. The Buddha taught that the attachment to the identity. And one of the things that I learned when I got to the monastery, the very first day, my teacher Ajahn said, we need to let go of all identity, and we need to completely strip away all the identity. And he said, and then when you're at a place anchored in yourself, clear in yourself, and solid in yourself, then you can then start to engage from the identity. But until then, he said, maybe don't get into a relationship. Maybe don't start to engage in a way of really expressing yourself. And that was one of the pieces that I had challenges with, because I'm an entrepreneur and I like to make money and I like to help people and I like to express my art and I like to be in a relationship. And the very first thing I had to do was leave a unhealthy relationship. That was the first thing. The second thing was I had to reestablish myself in business. And then the third thing was to reestablish myself as a creative in how I am. And so I find it really challenging, because ultimately what the Buddha taught, or what Buddhism teaches, is very helpful to strip away all identity. But it's very challenging, especially, I don't have kids, but if you have children, if you have a business. I had the luxury of taking almost 2 years off because of a very intense experience I had in business, in cryptocurrency. I ended up getting cyber attacked, money stolen, and then so my identity was stolen from me, literally. And I was reminded of that moment at the monastery. And so I had a choice of like, do I keep going with this false sense now that I know this is a false identity? But it's so hard, because I'm still now, a year and a half later, I'm not that version of me. And I'm trying to understand, as I know everyone I work with and all of my friends, there's so much from the past that's still here the practice, instead of abandoning, as I found in Buddhism, it's very yang dominant, it's very masculine. With Taoism, I found that it's much more yin. There's much more gentleness and flow. And so are there times where you find that overall, is it really about incorporating both and not negating? Or is it really, no, you need structure, you need guidance, you need grounding, you have to focus in on your masculine container versus, you're rigid, you're stuck, you need to focus in on your yin energy or feminine energy. Kind of, how do you see that play out?
Well, I think, of course, there has to be balance. You can't feel, express, be creative, flow if you're too rigid. At the same time, uncontained energy will create chaos. So you need both things. You need to create a container for yourself. I mean, this is not an easy balance to achieve within the self, and usually we need help. So one of the things that I think about when in my workshops, when I work with people, particularly in groups, is that we need other people to help us hold the container for ourselves until we can hold it for ourselves. Because at first, to let ourselves feel through all the way, it's going to take us out of control. It's going to take us into chaos, and we can't hold ourselves there. So we need other people to help us. And then, but ultimately, we need to create the structure for ourselves in order to manage all of our energy and all of our emotions. We need, I think, some kind of system, some kind of orientation, some way to think about it, something that can ground us in, so we're not just just flowing in a sense that's undefined. And at the same time, we can't be overly rigid, or that will kill all the life and the creativity. So I think it's always finding a balance between the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang.
Yeah, that feels good. I was on a call today with a client, and I was working with him on semen retention. One of the things I really share with men is about restraint, sexual restraint, and entering into a relationship from that point, not of ejaculation, but of really containing their energy. And one of the things I found with my male clients is that a lot of rejection comes up, and a lot of fear comes up when they're retaining. But a client this morning, we were talking about this, and so we were kind of seeing differently at this, and I'm curious what your perspective is. When we are in this re-establishment of ourself, like our anchored self in the world, and we're in a transition, let's say, and let's say we left a relationship. His girlfriend broke up with him. He's like completely confused because he thought they were in love, and now he's a little bit on like I would call it like a earthquake zone, where he's not sure which is land, and it's all just erupting under him. And so I had suggested him to go on a fast to practice his energy, to cultivate it, and he ended up meeting another woman and started a new relationship with her that he knows he doesn't want to be with her long term, but he's using it as kind of a practice, he says. And because what you just said about working with groups, like having this container, in my response to him was, how about finding a platonic group of people that aren't going to feed that sexual addiction that's nourishing the validation of I'm approved, I'm accepted, from the external world. Instead, I was like, let's create that container in a non-sexual way. And his response is, well, how am I going to learn about relationships if I'm not in a relationship learning? And I feel like there's a tricky experience in our desire to want to be in a relationship, the need for connection and intimacy, but yet kind of what I would call the in-between after a breakup and before you choose another partner, there's this in-between space. Is that where we want to take in, like you're saying, the group, the like being coached, having therapy? You know, how do we navigate that in-between? Because he's feeling a lot, and I think what I find is there's an avoidance in feeling what's actually underneath the surface.
Right, right. Well, I mean, it depends on the situation. Some people like to be in a relationship and like to go from one relationship to the next, and that's how they're going to learn, and they're going to learn it one way or the other, right? For me, I struggled in relationships for a lot of my life, and when I really saw that I was trapped in a pattern, and I stopped trusting myself, trusting, the kind of women that I was attracted to and would get into relationship with, because I knew there was something deep in my unconscious that was motivating me, and that these relationships all they became enmeshed, and there was something I was trying to work out, probably, well, definitely around my mother. So I took a long time off from relationship, and did a lot of self-inquiry and a lot of work. And when I finally got back in a relationship, I was much healthier, and ended up being attracted to a woman that was very different than any woman I'd ever been attracted to before, which was interesting. And it took me, and the whole development of the relationship was different, which I understood as a good sign, right? So if there was a pattern of attraction and relationship that all ended in frustration and pain, then it would make sense that a healthy relationship probably wouldn't follow that pattern, right? So that's something that people want to think about. We become very addicted to it. We become addicted to the high, that feeling of eros, that is very intoxicating, and it's hard to let go of. I think relationships are where most people do their deep work. And so I think that's why people get married. I think that's why the institution of marriage is so important. I think it's why people get married in front of large groups of people and spend a lot of money in their wedding, so that a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, it becomes difficult to break up. You're forced to deal with the marriage, deal with the problems, because it is very difficult, and you do want to leave. But really, what are you confronting? It's not the other person, it's yourself. It's always yourself. And so if you can see it that way, that it's not the other person, it's you, it's some aspect of you. Why are you attracted to certain kind of people? Why do you keep getting into these relationships that don't work out? What is that about you? And what is unresolved inside you? And if you can orient that to that in all your relationships, in life in general, you're just you come more into reality. And then there's a lot more opportunity for genuine connection, for love, and for self-acceptance. So, that's how I think about that.
I definitely concur. I think it depends on the relationship itself. I feel, I don't know if you know about David Deda's work, but there's a lot about what he has shared that I studied. Some I agree with, and some I don't. But there's something in what they teach is to show up as your authentic, fullest self, no matter who you're with. And one of the things that myself and a lot of the women that I work with, when it comes to being able to be our authentic selves, because my experience is not everyone deserves that part of me. Not everyone should get that part of me. And the selection of choosing the right person to open with versus, whoever's in front of me, I'm just going to open completely. And that's part of what I've found as a woman. I found it's very different for men. I was traveling the world. I was in 11 countries within a year, and I learned a lot in Europe. The experience I had with men there was it was easier to build something, to go on a road trip, to spontaneously just decide we're going to drive across the country and
Right.
and have dinner in some crazy place that we decided that day. And there was more flow. There was more availability for the feminine, my feminine, to be free, to be expressed, because they were holding me there and they were aware of how to nurture the flow. It was more about this depth of connection and this intimacy of, of learning about life and seeing things differently and having a new experience together, which I found was able to help me so much to relax and to be who I really am. Immediately, like showing me their heart, showing me their weaknesses, showing me, even not afraid to admit they made less money than me. Do you feel that that's cultural? Do you feel that that's maybe how mother raised son and what they were maybe in society, brought up with? Is that part of what we can say in terms of like doing this emotional work? Is part of it breaking down that culture and really looking at how mother raised me and all of that stuff?
I mean, I think there's definitely issues with men right now in American culture, and I think there's a lot of reasons for it. One, I think it's I think you have a lot of men who grew up without a father, and I think a lot of mothers made them the de facto man of the house, and so um, that's a role and a responsibility that they can't ever fulfill, and that creates a feeling of helplessness inside them in relationship to the woman, meaning they know they could never give their mother what it is that she needed. And so that gets projected out onto all women.
Mm.
And so there's a deep insecurity there. And there's also a lot of anger and rage about having to, being used in some way by the mother, the images of the devouring mother. And then, we've seen for the last however many years, um, a condemnation of the masculine. So, just toxic masculinity, just the phrase itself. I mean, people can say, well, this is what it means. Well, it doesn't matter what you say it means. It sounds like masculinity is toxic. And that's how it's interpreted. So that doesn't feel very good to men. And then constantly being told that they're the source of all the problems in the world. Everything has to do with men. So it makes sense that they would retract, pull back, fall into, I think on the deepest level, into despair, but that the mask of that would be resentment and anger. And there's really, like, listen, men are built to provide and protect. And if they're told that they're not needed, that that role isn't, necessary anymore because, women can take care of themselves and we don't need men. Well, then what incentive do they have to give anything to women? Like, it's just becomes from that cynical place. Well, I'm just going to get what I want. I don't feel wanted. I don't feel needed. So I'm just going to, use women the way I feel like I'm being used. And I guess that's what it is. So I think it's a sad state of affairs. I think it's a real problem in society. And I think nobody's happy with it. I mean, you're not happy with American men, and I don't think they're happy. And I think it's very sad. And I'm not sure when. I mean, I think there is a lot going on to reconcile it, and there's a lot of movements and work being done. Whether it's Sacred Sons, or other men's movement to try to heal this. So I see a lot of positive out there. And I meet a lot of, good men, and I think things are shifting, but I think it's been, it's been a rough go for the last 15, 20 years.
Mm. My whole dating experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. What came up for me as you were sharing was I was my first therapist in college, because I had an eating disorder. It was very hard for me in college. And I was drug raped in college my first week. And I went to the school and they wouldn't report it because it would look bad on their ratings. So I ended up going to a therapist, and she was a feminist. And I couldn't stand the woman because she hated men. She hated men. And I just remember this feeling of, number one, I don't like feminists. So I learned what feminism, the movement, was propagated by the government to tax, so that they could tax 100% of the population. Right. A lot of women don't know this. I actually worked a bit with Gloria Steinem. I talked with her a bit because I was a bit of an activist, but on the let's stop feminism. So I've actually been advocating more for men my whole life. Being raped, drug raped, being told that I couldn't talk about my drug rape by men. And what my heart is doing is I want to help men, especially young men, understand, first of all, most young guys come to me. I make a lot of posts, and they, I basically ask women to please stop manipulating, and I explain what that really is in behavior, because it's causing men to hate women, and it's projecting in men this need for them to then treat women like sex objects, so that they get some kind of need met. And a lot of these young guys come to me, basically, saying, wow, I wish all women could show up on a date like you're saying. And they're like, Robyn, no woman I've ever been with, they say, has ever shown up the way that you say, and it's hard for me. So a part of my mission is really to help men understand that they can attract more of a really solid feminine energy. And then for women, though, it's really, it's been challenging for me, because it's, coming from me, they may not want to hear that they're manipulating and being condescending and asking for things that they shouldn't, based on a movement that was propagated to make money off of them, that they don't even know that they've been brainwashed by. And so there's so much, there's so many dichotomies to break through. So I guess, our work never ends. So I guess it keeps coaches in business, keeps us, but it's one of the things that I find, I guess, as a motivating factor to keep going. But one of the things I'm curious your thoughts on, because I went and studied yoga 20 years ago, and one of the things we learned in the chant was, I am not my emotions are not mine. And for many years, I found it really challenging to feel anything. Being raped, having an eating disorder, everything was numb. And now I'm told that I'm not supposed to have emotions. And so I ended up having awakening experiences, my Kundalini, Shakti, very high. I had deep awakening experiences, but yet I'm not in a solid emotional state. So a lot of the people that I meet, from my perspective, they're in this spiritual realm, practicing spiritual practices. They're doing tantra events. They're going to Burning Man, whatever they're doing. They're having cuddle parties. They're all sleeping with each other, and it's like, it's good. It's good for me. And I believe in sacred connection. So this whole spiritual, yoga, I feel, is actually about coming back together, coming into self, not bypassing. So, is there anything you can share with those who are spiritual practitioners who may be spiritually bypassing and not even know it? Is there anything that you can share to help them understand that emotional piece instead of that bypassing of just being the flow boy and going with the flow? And
Yeah. Yeah. It's just another mask, the spiritual community. It's a cult, and they don't want to hear it from me, obviously. So it's like, to speak to them, it, people have to be ready to hear the truth, and they're only ready to hear the truth usually when they're in an enormous amount of pain or they make a big mistake. Um, we all have a shadow, and until you understand your capacity for cruelty, until you understand how capable you are of deep manipulation, until you understand the depths of your selfishness and your righteousness, and you can accept it in yourself as part of your humanity, you're not conscious.
mm-hmm.
Um, Consciousness is not, there's no bypassing of the lower self. There's no transcending of it. Like, we're animals, we're beasts, we're cruel. I mean, look around the world and see it for what it is. It's like, it's dark. It's a very, very, very dark place. And just look at history, and look at what we do to children. Look at what we're doing with transgender, quote unquote, transgender children right now. I mean, everybody knows that giving children puberty blockers is wrong. There's nobody that doesn't know that that's wrong, but we are deluding ourselves because people are afraid of being called out by activists, being called transphobes or whatever. So it's like, mostly people are cowards. Most people are sheep, and that's the truth of it. And they don't want to face these parts of themselves. So if you want to be a healer, if you want to, really help people, if you want to be a shaman, therapist, whatever it is, you have to know your capacity for darkness, and you have to see it in the world. You have to look it square in the eye and face it. Look down at the darkness and see yourself reflected back in that darkness, and know that that is you. I mean, you have to shake hands with the devil. You got to make friends with the devil inside yourself. It's like, because God is right there with all of that. There's no separation between the light and the dark. It's one thing. And so that's the biggest issue that I see in the spiritual, community, is just, they say they do shadow work, but not really. Not really, because the presentation is all positive. Everything is positive all the time, and it's bullshit, and it's actually destructive. Is how I feel about it.
Agree. Wow, thank you. I lived in Miami for 11 years, and it was the hardest time of my life because I ended up getting addicted to cocaine, which is not your friend, but it is very dark. I mean, being bulimic for 11 years, I actually got to a place where I couldn't keep water down, so I was hospitalized a lot, and I couldn't hold a job. I rose to the top of my industry as a journalist and ended up not being able to get out of bed. I couldn't get out of my house. So one of the things that helped me, which is what you're speaking to, I had to visit the darkest place of myself, and I had to integrate with that part of me, which is what I feel brought the Tao to me, or allowed me to be one with the Tao. And then when I met Taoists, I met Thich Nhat Hanh, I met people in just being that, I just got it, right? The Tao is within you, the yin and yang. And one of the things my teacher in Thailand a couple months back, he said, he was laughing at us. And he was saying, you can't just have the light, you also have to have the dark. Ha ha ha, good, bad, both. Like, if good come, bad come, it's okay. And we were really talking a lot about that. And Jordan Peterson talks about that. I call it befriend your beast. So when I go out in public and when I'm with people, that's always with me, and it's with me as my friend. I don't know if I'm not trying to make fun, but my friends and I, we call it like the Bali group.
Right.
I haven't been to Bali because I don't want that. And if I go, I feel like I'm gonna just like be so conflicting with their energy because I'm not gonna be like them. And maybe I want to go for the contrast. I don't know, but one of the things I found is, yeah, I bring all of me. And so when I'm with men, one of the things they always say is, you hold presence, like you can hold energy. And they're like, how do you do that? Can you show other women how to do that? And it's like, so is that because I'm bringing, like, I'm not just here with my light and the radiance. I'm actually here with all of the fucked up shit that's here, that's available, but also that I've been with, and it's not destroying me, but it's lifting me. Is that kind of what we're doing with our?
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you can't be present all the way present if you're not present with all the parts of yourself. I mean, it's that simple. And it's really at the heart of the work that I do. It's like, are you willing to know everything about yourself? The light and the dark, the good and the bad.
Hmm.
Are you willing to know everything? And if you are, then you'll be free. And if you are, then you'll be able to be present. Because if you're hiding aspects of yourself, from other people, well, you literally can't be present.
Hmm.
You're not present because you're hiding some part of yourself, or you're presenting an image of yourself. You're in that way, you're manipulating um, other people to control what it is they see about you. And freedom is just showing up as you are without concern how about how people are perceiving you. It's not your business how people are perceiving you. It has nothing to do with you. That's their own projection. So it's all we have now. That's obviously a difficult thing because in some sense we're hardwired to care about what other people think of us because we want to stay connected to the tribe. It's very important for our survival to a social status. But the truth is, we will gain the highest social status when we liberate ourselves from the burden of being concerned about what other people think, or letting our behaviors be dictated by that, being controlled by that. Because then, of course, we're not in our integrity. We betray ourselves in order to stay connected and in favor with other people, and people can feel that lack of integrity. But that's frankly what most people do, and that's what I often still do. That I have to catch myself. It's very, very hard to be yourself, to always say what you think, to even know what you think and feel in every situation. But that is the practice, and it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of consciousness. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of discernment, but it's worth it. I mean, that to me, that is what freedom is. I'm with myself. I know myself. I feel myself. I'm aware of myself, and I'm not in self-judgment or self-shame. I accept everything that comes up and through me, and I don't make myself bad or wrong. I mean, I take responsibility for the choices that I make and the impact that I have in other people, but I don't make myself bad, right? Because I'm not bad. I've just, maybe I make mistakes, maybe I do the wrong thing, but I give myself grace as I move through life, and I think that's a powerful place to be, and that's really what I'm trying to teach people.
Responsibility without punishment. Hmm. Yeah, a lot of what I've found is learning how to. I mean, the Buddhist practice is self-reliance, and I've learned that I want to be my own being autonomous from my partner, business and romantic. And yeah, I often find it challenging if they're not also meeting me in their own way in that self-reliance and self-responsibility. And I often find men that I attract that are very driven and successful financially or in their experience in business. I often find that they punish themselves. And one of my things, I've learned is with the eating disorder, it's a constant self implosion of punishment that I really had to train myself over the last 2 decades to really not punish myself, but to hold myself responsible in a healthy way. And I'm very sensitive if someone doesn't do that. And I find that most people don't know how to be responsible without like beating it into themselves. And one thing before we close, Elon Musk was on Joe Rogan probably a year or so ago. And he was talking about not being able to meditate. Joe asked, do you meditate? I meditate. Joe was like, I meditate every day. And I feel great. And Elon says, I can't. And he didn't say I won't. He says I can't. And I had dated a man that also said the same thing. And I would go study with the monks and I'd come back and his daughter and I would meditate. And he's like, I can't. He would always make sure that his mind was active
Right.
on business. Because he said, if he let go, just like Elon, he's like, if I let go, it'll all just fall apart. And it's kind of like, does the world fall apart because Elon's not focused on it with his mind? Like how do we help these high achievers? Is there something that we can share from your experience that allows us to help them, or do we just kind of let them do their thing and that's how they do it?
I'm not going to give Elon Musk any advice, man. That guy's, he's doing his thing, and we're all struggling. We all have blind spots. You don't, unless you're going to go sit in a cave for 30 years and meditate, you're probably not getting out of this life fully realized. We do the best we can. We carry the baton as far as we can in one lifetime and evolve ourselves as much as possible. But I mean, people like, I get what he's saying. I see the distortion of it. Like if he does let go, everything's going to be fine. But yeah, he's got a belief system that he's got to hang on tight to everything. That he can't just set it all down for a day, and probably because he doesn't know who he is there. And I think, I just think that's certain people, that's their dharma. That's what they're here to do. Like, I don't think the work that I do is right for everybody. And I don't think everybody should be doing it. I don't believe that everybody should be in therapy or everybody should be on a spiritual quest or path. I don't think that's for everyone. I think usually it's a small group of people that are holding that vibration for the world. And there's other people that are here to do other things, and they find God or fulfillment in other ways, without having that direct access to it or to work on it directly. I mean, I think there's a Michael Jordan, and there's a documentary on HBO that follows the Chicago Bulls during their heyday, and there was a moment where he was sitting at the piano in this bar after they won the 5th championship or something. And he delivered this virtuoso performance, and he was sitting there with the trophy, and he said, "You want to see the Buddha? I'm the Buddha." And he was right. I mean, in that moment, he was fully realized. Like he was pure, he was like a lion in the jungle, like just pure. And that's a deep state that he got himself into, so he didn't go to any therapy. He didn't do any meditation. He found God. He found, peace. He found that nirvana in in basketball and how he approached it. So you can find it anywhere, in anything. You can be a gardener. You can, I remember being working a summer job as a contractor, road contractor, sort of paving roads. And before you pave the roads, you grade the stone. And I had this boss who's like, there's an art to this paving stones. It's like grading the stones. It's like how you push it. It's like, and you can bring love to it. You can bring passion to it. Like you can bring yourself to this moment, to this job. Like, don't just see it as pushing stone around it. And I appreciated that. So in that sense, he was finding, the divine in paving roads. And so it's everywhere and in everything. And so, somebody like Elon Musk or whoever, they're going to find it in their own way, or not, but that's fine too.
Right. Yeah, the Peaceful Warrior shared that message. And there's a book that is funny. The title is If You Meet the Buddha on the Street, Shoot Him.
Right.
So I'm always a little weary when there's a self-proclaimed Jesus in the room.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I had a friend that I met, he was sweet. Met him in front of a Whole Foods in Miami years ago. And he had a big sign that said, I'm the new Jesus. and a lot of people were like, are you serious or are you joking? And he's like, that's up to you. So he would put it on you, but it would draw people in, and you still don't know, what his, so it's yeah. My last question is, Lincoln behind you, is there a affinity, or is there something?
I like his face more than anything. I think he's got one of the most interesting faces that ever been photographed. There's just a deep integrity in it, in his eyes. Also, there's a sadness, like you feel the loneliness of the job that he was in, which was leadership. And so that's one aspect that, just a reminder of that, and my own relationship to that gives me comfort. But also, he went to war to preserve the Union, and I think just that idea, just the concept, like I'm going to go to war to preserve the Union.
Hmm.
Like the South wanted to secede, leave, and he said, no, I'm not going to let you leave. We're going to go to war. I'm willing to go to war to force you to stay, to make you stay. That's a deep intention. It's a powerful concept. Like, we're going to stay together no matter what. And it goes back to what we were talking about with marriage. I think there's something in that commitment that is powerful. The willingness to stay, the willingness to commit to staying together at all costs. And so he represents that. I think that's one of the most noble intentions that I've ever heard of. To me, it's Christ-like.
I love that. Thank you. Do you find that being a leader? I mean, I've led companies before, and it's all quite different when you're leading the organization. Do you find that in leadership there's sacrifices in that role?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to sacrifice yourself for the good of the organization, and the buck stops with you. You're alone in that. Nobody's bearing the responsibility that you bear, and you get the adulations when things succeed, and you have to take the brunt of the criticism when things fail. And that's part of it. And to be able to do that with humility and grace, and hold all the transference, all the projection that's placed on you as a leader, whether it's, paternal or maternal, projection. You're carrying that. Nobody sees you. They only see, the projection, their own projection. And so to be able to hold that for other people and hold on to yourself and not to get taken away or carried away or influenced by all of the projections, whether they're positive or negative. That's a hard job.
That was my experience with the blockchain project, where I got the brunt of everything, and nobody knew. Our system was being hacked into by another company, by another project that didn't like us, and the launch was postponed. Immediately, they thought that we stole the money and went off and ran off with the money, when in reality, we were protecting the investor money. And to receive just thousands of threats, thousands, and like all at once, that really hit me, and it was a very intense experience. With the blockchain, outside of leading in business, I learned that a very deep lesson of, if you're going in that role, in that kind of environment, you have to just surrender your own self. But it does, reinforce you to elevate yourself, like, immediately. But it's such an intense experience that, So is there anything else that you'd like to share, David, before we close out?
No, I think that's it. Thank you for the conversation. I really appreciate it. Appreciate getting to know you, and interesting questions. And it sounds like you had a really interesting life path. So I appreciate you sharing of yourself and being with you here.
Thank you. Yeah, it was wonderful to share with you and receive and look at all the nuances. But I definitely resonate with your views and perspective and values, and it's how I see things, no matter what. It's just nothing can shake that part, really holding that essence. But I definitely would love to see more people applying what you're teaching. And do you do live events? Do you do groups that people can come to in a live setting?
Yeah, deepfeelingworkshops.com. That's my live events, and we host them in Austin, Texas, and other places, but Austin basically every 2 months. But if you go there, you can find my Instagram, David Sutcliffe 33. You'll see the link there in my bio, and yeah, we do live workshops. They're really, really powerful, and you can read all about them on the website. There's a video there, so you can get a sense of what it is and what we're doing. But if you're ready to go deep inside and know yourself all the way through, it's a great place to explore that.
Thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate your time. OG Mastery, the original gangsta, God and Goddess, all coming into mastery. We're coming into you. This is where we talk business, sex, relationships, money, health, entrepreneurship, and self-awareness.